Almeida. Hello again, this is Luis Almeida. I'm a teacher and student of the ideas of Gurdjieff and Spinoza. Today's topic is about Jesus and the Bible, what uh, Spinoza's views and his thoughts were regarding the Bible. Spinoza says that the Bible is the works of men and not of God. He studied the Bible extensively. Actually, he wrote a book called the Theological Political Treatise. This was written in the 17th century, and it's very useful even today to understand Spinoza's ideas. And his purpose was to, say, bring some sort of reality, a rational thinking, to help the people during that time to make reasonable choices and common sense that the clergy, the religious groups and organizations uh, made mankind miserable in believing that they're sinful and they're bad people and you'll never be saved and you'll go to hell. And you have to uh, uh, be very pray religion and all that nonsense. However, Spinoza's idea was to, again, enlighten the people, encourage the people to uh, begin to use their rational thinking. However, it really failed because the clergy at that time began to attack Spinoza, and his books were banned. And actually, his life was threatened because he dared to say that the Bible was not the work of God, but of man. The Bible, as Spinoza emphasized, is a good book, a book that helps curb excessive desires, a book of morality. And because our desires can be very excessive in the areas of uh, alcohol, food, sex, pleasures of the senses, and so forth, and become an alcoholic, a drug addict, and also workaholic. Now, these are all excessive desires. Addiction basically is an excessive desire. Now, regarding Jesus. Now, Jesus to Spinoza was a very, very highly spiritual man. He's a man. And just like you and I and others, but he was a special kind of man. What do you mean by special? He really studied and improved his understanding of human nature and the nature of God. And Spinoza said that in his ethics, in the section of the correspondence, he mentions that Jesus spoke to God mind to mind from the awakened intelligence, intuitive awakened intelligence that is different from the ego intellect. And I'm going to talk about that shortly. So Jesus was a man who really expressed our potential, how we can come to a Jesus-like state or a Spinoza-like state. Now, Spinoza was looked upon as the father of modern psychology and also a God-intoxicated man. What does that mean, God-intoxicated? Well, it just means that he understood the laws that expresses God's nature and the laws that influence human nature. Because without this God or Spinoza's God, now Spinoza's God is very different from the anthropomorphic being or the personal God that Christianity and others follow, which is totally imaginary and has no reality. However, Spinoza's God is a being of infinite attributes, and we are part of two. The attribute of thought and the attribute of extension. Now, I want to emphasize something here. Now, the mind is not in the brain. The brain is an organ that stores information. That's where your memory is stored. The mind is a non-tangible thing. However, the brain is a storehouse of information, and it helps regulate all the systems of the body with the aid of the digestive system and also the spinal cord. What do I mean by systems? The lymphatic system, the blood system, the skeletal system, the digestive system, the immune system, all the systems. Lymphatic system, I maybe said that already, but health regulates all the systems of the body. And this is where neuroscientists make a big error in their thinking, because they probe the brain and they observe body modifications or effects, and emotions will be expressed or thoughts will be communicated. What they're touching is these little cells or areas that is basically stored memory. It's like a computer chip. But what is the mind? The mind is a thinking thing, intangible thing. It's an idea. It is comprised of knowledge. And some of this are ideas. Is knowledge. So ideas can be clear or confused, and we must learn how to differentiate between what is true and what is false. So Spinoza saw Jesus and understood Jesus as a man who communicated wisdom. And I've read the parts of the Bible. The only part I'd like to read is the New Testament. And you can see it's an old book. I've read it for many years. But I'll give you an example of a great psychologist that Jesus, the man, was. He had this idea that mankind, you cannot serve two masters. Either you will love the one and hate the other, or embrace the one and reject the other. You cannot serve two masters. What does that mean? It means that if you are, for instance, if you're going to become a doctor, and you go and you're in school now, you're in school for 8 years, and you have a few more years to complete, and so you're become a doctor and become an intern. However, so your mind is so focused, and so that desire is your master. The idea in your mind is your master. However, there are other forces in human nature, in your nature, desire for relationship, desire for family. Now, either you're going to focus on becoming a doctor, or you're going to focus having a family. It's difficult to have both, to be a master of both. If you're going to be a master, if you're being a father and a family supporter, that's what you focus on. But what happens to human nature, you can do more than one. You can have two masters. However, you'll find out that if you become a doctor, you're so focused, you don't have time for the family. If you have a family, the job is so you become, say, a specialist in your field, a surgeon, and you're on call almost 24/7. When do you have time for a family? You don't. So there's neglect in the family. I remember this. I read. You probably heard of Dr. Mattei, Gabor Mattei. He's on a talk circuit. He gives seminars, and he's on many. He has many videos. You can go on YouTube and look up Dr. Gabor Mattei. He's a medical doctor, and now he talks about human nature. He talks about his own problems, his own addiction towards classical music, and also his addiction towards being a doctor. He had no time for the family. Great story. He also talks about the idea of addiction, heroin addiction. So either you're a master in one area, you can't be a master in two areas, but you think you can. There's the idea of, well, I can have multiple ways to handle problems. I can multitasking. What is happening, if you do for multitasking, you can only concentrate 25% on each fourth item. So that's 100% of concentration. And yes, some of you say, well, I can do more than one thing, but you can do it in a very weak state. You're not giving your best. You cannot give your best with your family. You cannot give your best to your partner, your wife, or your partner. You can't give your best to your children because you don't have the time. So Jesus says you cannot be a master of God. And what is God? Uh, like I mentioned, that we are part of God's nature. The attribute of thought has to do with our thinking, and the attribute of extension. Extension has to do with the physical universe. So we are a mode, we are a part of this attribute. So without these two attributes, mankind would not exist. All biological creatures would not exist. All right. So so if you apply your mind to becoming a specialist in any field, an attorney, a hairstylist, you don't really have time for a spiritual development. Spiritual development, it takes a back seat. So if your profession or your career or your family becomes first before your spiritual growth will never develop. When I was in my 30s, I had everything. Every young man wants a business. I was a hairstylist. I had a salon. I had employees. I had a great clientele. I was married. I had homes and property at 30 years old. Now I'm 81. I'm going to be 82. The date today is what is it? April 16th, 2023. So I'll be 82 in August. And I hope to live to another 10, 20, 30 years because I love this work that I'm doing with Spinoza. And I want to share it with you. Hopefully I can stimulate you to want to pick up the book of ethics, but you're going to find it very difficult. But there's another book that will make it easier for you to read and to grasp what I'm doing. And this is the book. It's called How to Solve Life's Problems. Oh, no, that's not the book. How to Solve Life's Problems is this book. This is a book written by my teacher, and I had to publish it because it's so important. I use this also as a guide to help my students understand and how to work with Spinoza in a practical way. I'll give you an example. Chapter 7, discriminating between your intelligence and your memory. Are you becoming aware that almost everything you do is based on responses of memory patterns to present problems, situations, circumstances, and the like? We are all programmed early in life with different patterns that become embedded in your memory banks. The result is almost all of our mature existence has been predetermined, so that instead of living spontaneously in the now, we're responding mindlessly. That is, without consciousness to various external stimuli. And then this is what we want to begin to realize what's possible. When we begin dimly at first to recognize the great difference between our intelligence and your memory, your intelligence will slowly and gradually become activated. And that's what we want. We want to learn how to activate the mind. We want to learn how to know the difference between our memory, and our memory is dependent on the ego intellect. The ego intellect is, it has some certain creativity, but it only is aware of its senses and its desires and its emotional problems and reactions. And so what the work that I'm proposing is possible to know thyself, as Socrates said, is to know thyself is to know our nature. When our desires are not met, you are going to experience pain. Pain is a feeling of not being satisfied. Our desires are not realized. And when our desires are not realized, we automatically go into pain. And then because we believe the person or the thing stops us from accomplishing our goal. But you want to find out, what is your goal? What is your purpose? It could be a small thing. Going to your car and going to your first date, and you find your car won't start. And you say you're 18 years old. Or you might be 40 years old, and you just got divorced. You've been divorced a couple of years, and now you're on a dating circuit looking for the right person. And you have make an appointment, or you set up a date, kind of a coffee just to introduce yourself. You're there waiting, and they don't show up. So you're going to feel pain, and you're going to feel hate, and you're going to feel anger. To know these emotions stimulates and activates the mind. The ego intellect does not want this, does not want to look at your emotions. And basically, the ego intellect is a sleep state. What do I mean by that? It's a semi-conscious state. We're aware of our desires, but we're not conscious of the causes of them. We're aware of our reactions, but we're not aware of the causes. Now, the other book that I want to mention is called The Way of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. Now, if you try to read Spinoza's Ethics, this is it. Now, you can get these books on my website. I don't get compensated for the ethics. It's online, Amazon.com. You can buy a used book for about $2 or $3, and then plus shipping. But this book has been on the shelves of many of my students because they don't know how to get into it because it's so difficult. It's not the words. The words are easy. They're not highfalutin words. They're simple, but the ideas are so complex, so different. All right. And to understand what Spinoza is communicating, that's my job. I've been doing this for over 50 years now. And it's taken me a long time to understand Spinoza, but I understand a great deal, and I'm still learning. So I wrote a book called The Way of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. Now, this is, again, I wrote this book, I published it for my students. I don't earn a lot of money from these books. I'm lucky if I sell maybe 2 or 3 books a month. However, the book is required reading for my students because it helps us understand Spinoza and Gurdjieff. And case studies, many of my students I work with, I help them, I explain their experiences and how they relate Spinoza or Gurdjieff to improve their understanding and how to live more active, purposeful, and solving problems with not regret, with dread, but with enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm grows. Interest. Gurdjieff said something very important. He said that our ego, intellect, gets into trouble, but the higher mind, the intelligence, the awake state, grows from the problems of the ego. The ego is the material for growth. And let me make it clear: we need an ego. Without an ego, we survive. We cannot survive. There's many so-called spiritual people out there, mystics, gurus, Eastern teachers, and even Buddhism talk about you must not desire. Stop the desire. Stop thinking. Don't think. The mind is not a good thing. Nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what the mind is. Spinoza wrote his Ethics over 300 years ago and is still relevant today. There are many so-called professors of philosophy have read books about Spinoza, and none of them really understand Spinoza. They apply Spinoza more intellectually. As Gurdjieff communicated, intellectual knowledge has no power. You might recall information, but you cannot use that information. Spinoza is not just to intellectualize, but to live his ideas. And that's what I do. So this is living Spinoza and Gurdjieff's ideas. Now back to Jesus. He said, you cannot serve 2 masters. So when I was successful at the age of 30, mind you, and I've been with I found my teacher. What was I looking for? Even though I had all the material things and the money I needed, I was very unhappy. Why? Because my mind was very weak. I could not have an intelligent conversation, but I was able to be a good hairstylist and learn how to operate a business. But as far as looking at myself and understand how things are put together, to rationalize, reason. I didn't have much rational thinking. At a certain level, I did. But I felt so inadequate, inferior, because I dropped out of high school at 10th grade because I could not keep up. And going to junior college was out of the question because I could not focus. And that was my problem. And I used to curse God for not giving me the intellect that my siblings had. They seemed to grab things. They got A's in school. They were far superior than I was intellectually. I felt so inferior, so inadequate. When I met my teacher, I heard these ideas and it touched me deeply. How to become a master of oneself, how to become a master of your emotions or my emotions. And that stimulated me. And I was with my teacher for over 20 years. And so I realized that the significance of Spinoza, and I had to learn how to study Spinoza on my own. It took a while, but that's what I teach. I want to help you understand Spinoza on your own. However, you must realize, and I found that if you're on a career path or you're on a path to running, find a mate, a girlfriend, or a marriage, or just focus on the opposite sex, you don't have time for this. But I'm looking for people who are dissatisfied with their life, who want true fulfillment, who want to have a meaningful life, a purposeful life. And that's what you want to become, a master of your emotions, a master of your life through the understanding of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. I hope this is helpful. I want to add one more thing. There's a book called the Spinoza Short Treatise on God, Man, and His Well-Being. I resurfaced this. But this book was written prior to Spinoza's Ethics. It's a highly spiritually oriented book. But Spinoza talks about our first birth and another birth called the second birth. The first birth is that we're aware of our body, our senses, and and we love our body. That's the first thing we love is our body and all the pleasures that we get from our senses: the food, the drink, the sex, the fun, the pleasures, of course, and money and material things, all sensual pleasures and pleasures of the images. Now, Spinoza says there's a second birth, and the second birth is to become aware of thyself. Socrates talked about it, and many others, but they did not know how to get there. They used their intellectual ideas. That's not enough. To understand Spinoza, there must be an emotion. And what is that emotion? Desire and love. I desire to learn, and I love my effort to learn. I hope this is helpful. Give me a comment. You might want to look at my website and look down below. You'll find it at wayofspinoza.com. See you later.